Welcome back, everyone. Today we will be reading part 8 and the epilogue for Secret Window, Secret Garden. So let's get into it. Amy tried the door and found it unlocked. She stepped in, started to call for Mort, and then didn't. She looked around, wide-eyed and startled. The place was a mess. The trash can was full and had overflowed onto the floor. A few sluggish autumn flies were crawling in and out of an aluminum pot pie dish that had been kicked into the corner. She could smell stale cooking and musty air. She thought she could even smell spoiled food. Mort? There was no answer. She walked further into the house, taking small steps, not entirely sure she wanted to look at the rest of the place. Miss Gavin had been in only 3 days ago. How had things gotten so out of hand since then? What had happened? She had been worried about Mort during the entire last year of their marriage, but she had been even more worried since the divorce. Worried, and of course, guilty. She held part of the blame for herself and supposed she always would. But Mort had never been strong, and his greatest weakness was his stubborn, and sometimes almost hysterical, refusal to recognize the fact. This morning, he had sounded like a man on the point of suicide, and the only reason she had heeded his admonition not to bring Ted was because she thought the sight of him might set Mort off, if he really was poised on the edge of such an act. The thought of murder had never crossed her mind, nor did it do so now. Even when he had brandished the gun at them that horrible afternoon at the motel, she had not been afraid. Not of that. Mort was no killer. Mort? She came around the kitchen counter, and the word died. She stared at the big living room with wide, stunned eyes. Paper was littered everywhere. It looked as if Mort must at some point have exhumed every copy of every manuscript he had in his desk drawers and in his files and strewn the pages about in here like confetti at some Black New Year's Eve celebration. The table was heaped with dirty dishes. The silex was lying scattered on the floor by the window wall, which was cracked. And everywhere was one word. The word was shooter. Shooter had been written on the walls in colored chalks he must have taken from her drawer of art supplies. Shooter was sprayed on the window twice in what looked like dried whipped cream. And yes, there was the Ready Whip pressure can lying discarded under the stove. Shooter was written over and over on the kitchen counters in ink, and on the wooden support posts of the deck on the far side of the house in pencil. A neat column, like adding that went down in a straight line and said shooter, 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 shooter. Worst of all, it had been carved into the polished cherrywood surface of the table in great jagged letters, 3 feet high, like a grotesque declaration of love. Shooter. The screwdriver he had used to do this last was lying on a chair nearby. There was red stuff on its steel shaft, stained from the cherry wood, she assumed. Mort? She whispered, looking around. Now she was frightened that she would find him dead by his own hand. And where? Why, in the study, of course. Where else? He had lived all the most important parts of his life in there. Surely he had chosen to die there. Although she had no wish to go in, no wish to be the one to find him, her feet carried her in that direction all the same. As she went, she kicked the issue of EQMM Herb Creekmore had sent out of her way. She did not look down. She reached the study door and pushed it slowly open. Mort stood in front of his old royal typewriter, The screen and keyboard unit of his word processor lay overturned in a bouquet of glass on the floor. He looked strangely like a country preacher. It was partly the posture he had adopted, she supposed. He was standing almost primly with his hands behind his back. But most of it was the hat. The black hat, pulled down so it almost touched the tops of his ears. She thought he looked a little bit like the old man in that picture, American Gothic, even though the man in the picture wasn't wearing a hat. "Mort?" she asked. Her voice was weak and uncertain. He made no reply, only stared at her. His eyes were grim and glittering. She had never seen Mort's eyes look this way, not even on the horrible afternoon at the motel. It was almost as if this was not Mort at all, but some stranger who looked like Mort. She recognized the hat, though. "Where did you find that old thing? The attic?" Her heartbeat was in her voice, making it stagger. He must have found it in the attic. The smell of mothballs on it was strong, even from where she was standing. Mort had gotten the hat years ago at a gift shop in Pennsylvania. They had been traveling through Amish country. She had kept a little garden at the dairy house, in the angle where the house and the study addition met. It was her garden, but Mort often went out to weed it when he was stuck for an idea. He usually wore the hat when he did this. He called it his thinking cap. She remembered him looking at himself in a mirror once when he was wearing it and joking that he ought to have a book jacket photo taken in it. "When I put this on," he'd said, "I look like a man who belongs out in the North 40, walking plow furrows behind a mule's ass." Then the hat had disappeared. It must have migrated down here and been stored, but... "It's my hat," he said at last in a rusty, bemused voice. "Wasn't ever anybody else's." "Mort, what's wrong? What's—" "You got you a wrong number, woman. Ain't no Mort here. Mort's dead." The gimlet eyes never wavered. "He did a lot of squirming around, but in the end, he couldn't lie to himself any more, let alone to me. I never put a hand on him, Miss Rainey, I swear. He took the coward's way out." "Why are you talking that way?" Amy asked. "This is just the way I talk," he said with mild surprise. "Everybody down in Mississippi talks this way." "Mort, stop." "Don't you understand what I said?" he asked. "You ain't deaf, are you? He's dead. He killed himself." "Stop it, Mort," she said, beginning to cry. "You're scaring me. I don't like it." "Don't matter," he said. He took his hands out from behind his back. In one of them, he held the scissors from the top drawer of the desk. He raised them. The sun had come out, and it sent a star flash glitter along the blades as he snicked them open and then closed. "You won't be scared long." He began walking toward her. For a moment, she stood where she was. Mort would not kill her. If there had been killing in Mort, then surely he would have done some that day at the motel. Then she saw the look in his eyes and understood that Mort knew that too. But this wasn't him. She screamed and wheeled around and lunged for the door. Shooter came after her, bringing the scissors down in a silver arc. He would have buried them up to the handles between her shoulder blades if his feet had not slid on the papers, scattered about the hardwood floor. He fell full length with a cry of mingled perplexity and anger. The blade stabbed down through page 9 of Secret Window, Secret Garden, and the tips broke off. His mouth struck the floor and sprayed blood. The package of Pall Malls, the brand John Kintner had silently smoked during the breaks halfway through the writing class he and Mort Rainey had shared, shot out of his pocket and slid along the slick wood like the weight in a bar-room shuffleboard game. He got up on his knees, his mouth snarling and smiling through the blood which ran over his lips and teeth. Won't do you no help, Miss Rainey, he cried, getting to his feet. He looked at the scissors, snicked them open to study the blunted tips a little better, and then tossed them impatiently aside. I got a place in the garden for you. I got it all picked out. You mind me now. He ran out the door after her. Halfway across the living room, Amy took her own spill. One of her feet came down on the discarded issue of EQMM, and she fell sprawling on her side, hurting her hip and right breast. She cried out. Behind her, Shooter ran across to the table and snatched up the screwdriver he had used on the cat. Stay right there and be still, he said as she turned over on her back and stared at him with wide eyes which looked almost drugged. If you move around, I'm only going to hurt you before it's over. I don't want to hurt you, missus, but I will if I have to. I've got to have something, you see. I have come all this way, and I've got to have something for my trouble. As he approached, Amy propped herself up on her elbows and shoved herself backward with her feet. Her hair hung in her face. Her skin was coated with sweat. She could smell it pouring out of her, hot and stinking. The face above her was the solemn, judgmental face of insanity. No, Mort! Please! Please, Mort! He flung himself at her, raising the screwdriver over his head and then bringing it down. Amy shrieked and rolled to the left. Pain burned a line across her hip as the screwdriver blade tore her dress and grooved her flesh. Then she was scrambling to her knees, hearing and feeling the dress shred out of a long, unwinding strip as she did it. No, ma'am, Shooter panted. His hand closed upon her ankle. No, ma'am. She looked over her shoulder and through the tangles of her hair and saw he was using his other hand to work the screwdriver out of the floor. The round, crowned black hat sat askew on his head. He yanked the screwdriver free and drove it into her right calf. The pain was horrid. The pain was the whole world. She screamed and kicked backward, connecting with his nose, breaking it. Shooter grunted and fell on his side, clutching at his face, and Amy got to her feet. She could hear a woman howling. It sounded like a dog howling at the moon. She supposed it wasn't a dog. She supposed it was her. Shooter was getting to his feet. His lower face was a mask of blood. The mask split open, showing Mort Rainey's crooked front teeth. She could remember licking across those teeth with her tongue. Feisty one, ain't you? He said, grinning. That's all right, ma'am. You go right on. He lunged at her. Amy staggered backward. The screwdriver fell out of her calf and rolled across the floor. Shooter glanced at it, then lunged at her again, almost playfully. Amy grabbed one of the living room chairs and dumped it in front of him. For a moment, they only stared at each other over it. And then he snatched for the front of her dress. Amy recoiled. I'm about done fussing with you, he panted. Amy turned and bolted for the door. He was after her at once, flailing at her back, his fingertips skating and skidding down the nape of her neck, trying to close on the top of the dress, catching it, then just missing the hold which would have coiled her back to him for good. Amy bolted past the kitchen counter and toward the back door. Her right loafer squelched and smooshed on her foot. It was full of blood. Shooter was after her, puffing and blowing bubbles of blood from his nostrils, clutching at her. She struck the screen door with her hands, then tripped and fell full length on the porch, the breath whooshing out of her. She fell exactly where Shooter had left his manuscript. She rolled over and saw him coming. He only had his bare hands now, but they looked like they would be more than enough. His eyes were stern and unflinching, and horribly kind beneath the brim of the black hat. I'm so sorry, missus, he said. Rainey, a voice cried. Stop! She tried to look around and could not. She had strained something in her neck. Shooter never even tried. He simply came on toward her. "Rainey, stop!" "There is no Rainey here," Shooter began, and then a gunshot rapped briskly across the fall air. Shooter stopped where he was and looked curiously, almost casually, down at his chest. There was a small hole there. No blood issued from it, at least not at first. But the hole was there. He put his hand to it, then brought it away. His index finger was marked by a small dot of blood. It looked like a bit of punctuation, the period which ends a sentence. He looked at this thoughtfully. Then he dropped his hands and looked at Amy. "Babe?" he asked, and then fell full length beside her on the porch boards. She rolled over, managed to get up on her elbows, and crawled to where he lay, beginning to sob. "Mort," she cried. "Mort, please, Mort, try to say something." But he was not going to say anything, and after a moment she let this realization fill her up. She would reject the simple fact of his death again and again over the next few weeks and months, and would then weaken, and the realization would fill her up again. He was dead. He was dead. He had gone crazy down here, and he was dead. He and whoever had been inside him at the end. She put her head down on his chest and wept. And when someone came up behind her and put a comforting hand on her shoulder, Amy did not look around. Epilogue. Ted and Amy Milner came to see the man who had shot and killed Amy's first husband, the well-known writer Morton Rainey, about 3 months after the events at Tashmore Lake. They had seen the man at one other time during the 3-month period at the inquest, but that had been a formal situation, and Amy had not wanted to speak to him personally. Not there. She was grateful that he had saved her life, but Mort had been her husband, and she had loved him for many years, and in her deepest heart she felt that Fred Evans's finger hadn't been the only one which pulled the trigger. She would have come in time anyway, she suspected, in order to clarify it as much as possible in her mind. Her time might have been a year or 2, possibly even 3. But things had happened in the meanwhile which made her move more quickly. She had hoped Ted would let her come to New York alone, but he was emphatic. Not after the last time he had let her go someplace alone. That time she had almost gotten killed. Amy pointed out with some asperity that it would have been hard for Ted to let her go, since she had never told him she was going in the first place, but Ted only shrugged. So they went to New York together, rode up to the 53rd, to the small cubicle in the offices of the Consolidated Assurance Company, which Fred Evans called home during the working day. Unless he was in the field, of course. She sat as far into the corner as she could get, and although the offices were quite warm, she kept her shawl wrapped around her. Evan's manner was slow and kind. He seemed to her almost like the country doctor who had nursed her through her childhood illnesses, and she liked him. But that's something he'll never know, she thought. I might be able to summon up the strength to tell him, and he would nod, but his nod wouldn't indicate belief. He only knows that to me, he will always be the man who shot Mort, and he had to watch me cry on Mort's chest until the ambulance came, and one of the paramedics had to give me a shot before I would let him go. And what he won't know is that I like him just the same. He buzzed a woman from one of the outer offices and had her bring in 3 big steaming mugs of tea. It was January outside now, the wind high, the temperature low. She thought with some brief longing of how it would be in Tashmore, with the lake finally frozen and that killer wind blowing long, ghostly snakes of powdered snow across the ice. Then her mind made some obscure but nasty association, and she saw Mort hitting the floor, saw the package of Pall Malls skidding across the wood like a shuffleboard weight. She shivered, her brief sense of longing totally dispelled. "Are you okay, Miss Milner?" Evans asked. She nodded. Frowning, ponderously, and playing with his pipe, Ted said, "My wife wants to hear everything you know about what happened, Mr. Evans. I tried to discourage her at first, but I've come to think that it might be a good thing. She's had bad dreams ever since." "Of course," Evans said, not exactly ignoring Ted, but speaking directly to Amy. "I suppose you will for a long time. I've had a few of my own, actually. I never shot a man before." He paused, then added, "I missed Vietnam by a year or so." Amy offered him a smile. It was wan, but it was a smile. "She heard it all at the inquest," Ted went on, "but she wanted to hear it again from you, and with the legalese omitted." "I understand," Evans said. He pointed at the pipe. "You can light that if you want to." Ted looked at it, then dropped it into the pocket of his coat quickly, as if he were slightly ashamed of it. "I'm trying to give it up, actually." Evans looked at Amy. "What purpose do you think this will serve?" he asked her in the same kind, rather sweet voice. "Or maybe a better question would be, what purpose do you need it to serve?" "I don't know." Her voice was low and composed. "But we were in Tashmore 3 weeks ago, Ted and I, to clean the place out. We've put it up for sale, and something happened. 2 things, actually." She looked at her husband and offered the wan smile again. "Ted knows something happened, because that's when I got in touch with you and made this appointment. But he doesn't know what, and I'm afraid he's put out with me. Perhaps he's right to be." Ted Milner did not deny that he was put out with Amy. His hand stole into his coat pocket, started to remove the pipe, and then he let it drop back again. "But these 2 things, they bear on what happened at your lake home in October?" "I don't know. Mr. Evans, what did happen? How much do you know?" "Well," he said, leaning back in his chair and sipping from his mug, "if you came expecting all the answers, you're going to be sorely disappointed. I can tell you about the fire, but as for why your husband did what he did, you can probably fill in more of those blanks than I can. What puzzled us most about the fire was where it started. Not in the main house, but in Mr. Rainey's office, which is an addition. That made the act seem directed against him, but he wasn't even there. Then we found a large chunk of bottle in the wreckage of the office. It had contained wine, champagne to be exact, but there wasn't any doubt that the last thing it had contained was gasoline. Part of the label was intact, and we sent a fax copy to New York. It was identified as Moet de Chandon, 1980-something. That wasn't proof indisputable that the bottle used for the Molotov cocktail came from your own wine room, Miss Milner. But it was very persuasive, since you listed better than a dozen bottles of Moet et Chandon, some from 1983 and some from 1984. This led us toward a supposition which seemed clear but not very sensible, that you or your ex-husband might have burned down your own house. Miss Milner here said she went off and left the house unlocked. I lost a lot of sleep over that, she said. I often forgot to lock up when I was only going out for a little while. I grew up in a little town north of Bangor, and country habits die hard. Mort used to... Her lips trembled and she stopped speaking for a moment, pressing them together so tightly they turned white. When she had herself under control again, she finished her thought in a low voice. He used to scold me about it. Ted took her hand. It didn't matter, of course, Evan said. If you had locked the house, Mr. Rainey still could have gained access because he still had his keys, correct? Yes, Ted said. It might have sped up the detection end a little if you'd locked the door, but it's impossible to say for sure. Monday morning, quarterbacking is a vice we try to steer clear of, in my business anyway. There's a theory that it causes ulcers, and that's one I subscribe to. The point is this. Given Miss Milner's testimony that the house was left unlocked, we at first believed the arsonist could have been literally anyone. But once we started playing around with the assumption that the bottle used had come from the cellar wine room, it narrowed things down. Because that room was locked, Ted said. Evans nodded. Do you remember me asking who held keys to that room, Miss Milner? Call me Amy, won't you? He nodded. Do you remember Amy? Yes. We started locking the little wine closet 3 or 4 years ago after some bottles of Red Table wine disappeared. Mort thought it was the housekeeper. I didn't like to believe it because I liked her, but I knew he could be right, and probably was. We started locking it then so nobody else would be tempted. Evans looked at Ted Milner. Amy had a key to the wine room, and she believed Mr. Rainey still had his, so that limited the possibilities. Of course, if it had been Amy, you would have had to have been in collusion with her, Mr. Milner, since you were each other's alibis for that evening. Mr. Rainey didn't have an alibi, but he was at a considerable distance, and the main thing was this. We could see no motive for the crime. His work had left both Amy and himself financially comfortable. Nevertheless, we dusted for fingerprints and came up with 2 good ones. This was the day after we had our meeting in Derry. Both prints belonged to Mr. Rainey. It still wasn't proof. It wasn't? Ted asked, looking startled. Evans shook his head. Lab tests were able to confirm that the prints were made before what remained of the bottle was charred in the fire, but not how long before. The heat had cooked the oils in them, you see. And if our assumption that the bottle came from the wine room was correct, why, someone had to physically pick it up out of the bag or carton it came in and store it in its cradle. That someone would have been either Mr. or Mrs. Rainey, and he could have argued that that was where the prints came from. He was in no shape to argue anything, Amy said softly. Not at the end. I guess that's true. But we didn't know that. All we knew is that when people carry bottles, they generally pick them up by the neck or the upper barrel. These 2 prints were near the bottom, and the angle was very odd. As if he had been carrying it sideways or even upside down, Ted broke in. That's what you said at the hearing? Yes, and people who know anything about wine don't do it. With most wines, it disturbs the sediment. And with champagne, it shakes it up, Ted said. Evans nodded. If you shake a bottle of champagne really hard, it will burst from the pressure. But there was no champagne in it anyway, Amy said quietly. No. Still, it was not proof. I canvassed the area gas stations to see if anyone who looked like Mr. Rainey had bought a small amount of gas that night, but had no luck. I wasn't too surprised. He could have bought the gasoline in Tashmore or at 6 service stations between the 2 places. Then I went to see Patricia Champion, our one witness. I took a picture of a 1986 Buick, the make and model we assumed Mr. Rainey would have been driving. She said it might have been the car, but she still couldn't be sure, so I was up against it. I went back out to the house to look around, and you came, Amy. It was early morning. I wanted to ask you some questions, but you were clearly upset. I did ask you why you were there, and you said a peculiar thing. You said you were going down to Tashmore Lake to see your husband, but you came by first to look in the garden. On the phone, he kept talking about what he called my secret window, the one that looked down on the garden. He said he'd left something there, but there wasn't anything. Not that I could see anyway. I had a feeling about the man when we met, Evans said slowly. A feeling that he wasn't quite on track. It wasn't that he was lying about some things, although I was pretty sure he was. It was something else. A kind of distance. Yeah, I felt it in him more and more, that distance. You looked almost sick with worry. I decided I could do worse than follow you down to the other house, Amy, especially when you told me not to tell Mr. Milner here where you'd gone if he came looking for you. I didn't believe that idea was original with you. I thought I might just find something out. And I also thought... He trailed off, looking bemused. You thought something might happen to me, she said. Thank you, Mr. Evans. He would have killed me, you know. If you hadn't followed me, he would have killed me. I parked at the head of the driveway and walked down. I heard a terrific rumpus from inside the house, and I started to run. That was when you, more or less, fell out through the screen door, and he came after you. Evans looked at them both earnestly. I asked him to stop, he said. I asked him twice. Amy reached out, squeezed his hand gently for a moment, and then let it go. And that's it, Evans said. I know a little more, mostly from the newspapers and 2 chats I had with Mr. Milner. Call me Ted. Ted, then. Evans did not seem to take to Ted's first name as easily as he had to Amy's. I know that Mr. Rainey had what was probably a schizophrenic episode in which he was 2 people, and that neither one of them had any idea they were actually existing in the same body. I know that one of them was named John Shooter. I know from Herbert Creekmore's deposition that Mr. Rainey imagined the shooter was hounding him over a story called Sowing Season, and that Mr. Creekmore had a copy of the magazine in which that story appeared sent up to Mr. Rainey, so that he could prove that he had published first. The magazine arrived shortly before you did, Amy. It was found in the house. The Federal Express envelope it came in was on the seat of your ex-husband's Buick. But he cut the story out, didn't he? Ted asked. Not just the story, the contents page as well. He was careful to remove every trace of himself. He carried a Swiss Army knife, and that was probably what he used. The missing pages were in the Buick's glove compartment. In the end, the existence of that story became a mystery, even to him, Amy said softly. Evans looked at her, eyebrows raised. Beg pardon? She shook her head. Nothing. I think I've told you everything I can, Evans said. Anything else would be pure speculation. I'm an insurance investigator, after all, not a psychiatrist. He was 2 men, Amy said. He was himself, and he became a character he created. Ted believes that the last name, Shooter, was something Mort picked up and stored in his head when he found out Ted came from a little town called Shooter's Knob, Tennessee. I'm sure he's right. Mort was always picking out character names just that way, like anagrams almost. I don't know the rest of it. I can only guess. I do know that when a film studio dropped its option on his novel, The Delacour Family, Mort almost had a nervous breakdown. They made it clear, and so did Herb Creekmore, that they were concerned about an accidental similarity, and they understood he never could have seen the screenplay, which was called The Home Team. There was no question of plagiarism, except in Mort's head. His reaction was exaggerated, abnormal. It was like stirring a stick around in what looks like a dead campfire and uncovering a live coal. You don't think he created John Shooter just to punish you, do you? Evans asked. No. Shooter was there to punish Mort, I think. She paused and adjusted her shawl, pulling it a little more tightly about her shoulders. Then she picked up her teacup with a hand which wasn't quite steady. I think that Mort stole somebody's work sometime in the past, she said. Probably quite far in the past, because everything he wrote from the organ grinder's boy on was widely read. It would have come out, I think. I doubt that he even actually published what he stole. But I think that's what happened, and I think that's where John Shooter really came from. Not from the film company dropping his novel or from my time with Ted, and not from the divorce. Maybe all those things contributed, but I think the root goes back to a time before I knew him. Then, when he was alone at the lake house, Shooter came, Evans said quietly. He came and accused him of plagiarism. Whoever Mr. Rainey stole from never did, so in the end, he had to punish himself. But I doubt if that was all, Amy. He did try to kill you. No, she said. That was Shooter. He raised his eyebrows. Ted looked at her carefully, and then drew the pipe out of his pocket again. The real Shooter. I don't understand you. She smiled her wan smile. I don't understand it myself. That's why I'm here. I don't think telling this serves any practical purpose. Mort's dead, and it's over. But it may help me. It may help me to sleep better. Then tell us, by all means, Evans said. You see, when we went down to clean out the house, we stopped at the little store in town, Bowie's. Ted filled the gas tank. It's always been self-service at Bowie's, and I went to get some things. There was a man in there, Sonny Trotz, who used to work with Tom Greenleaf. Tom was the older of the two caretakers who were killed. Sonny wanted to tell me how sorry he was about Mort, and he wanted to tell me something else, too, because he saw Mort the day before Mort died and meant to tell him. So he said. It was about Tom Greenleaf. Something Tom told Sonny while they were painting the Methodist Parish Hall together. Sonny saw Mort after that, but didn't think to tell him right away, he said. Then he remembered that it had something to do with Greg Carstairs. The other dead man? Yes. So he turned around and called, but Mort didn't hear him, and the next day, Mort was dead. What did Mr. Greenleaf tell this guy? That he thought he might have seen a ghost, Amy said calmly. They looked at her, not speaking. Sonny said Tom had been getting forgetful lately, and that Tom was worried about it. Sonny thought it was no more than the ordinary sort of forgetfulness that settles in when a person gets a little older, but Tom had nursed his wife through Alzheimer's disease 5 or 6 years before, and he was terrified of getting it himself and going the same way. According to Sonny, if Tom forgot a paintbrush, he spent half the day obsessing about it. Tom said that was why. When Greg Carstairs asked him if he recognized the man he'd seen Mort Rainey talking to the day before, or if he would recognize him if he saw him again, Tom said he hadn't seen anyone with Mort, that Mort had been alone. There was the snap of the match. Ted Milner had decided to light his pipe after all. Evans ignored him. He was leaning forward in his chair, his gaze fixed intently on Amy Milner. Let's get this straight. According to this Sonny Trotz. Okay, Trotz. According to him, Tom Greenleaf did see Mort with someone? Not exactly, Amy said. Sonny thought if Tom believed it for sure, he wouldn't have lied to Greg. What Tom said was that he didn't know what he'd seen, that he was confused, that it seemed safer to say nothing about it at all. He didn't want anybody, particularly Greg Carstairs, who was also in the caretaking business, to know how confused he was. And most of all, he didn't want anybody to think that he might be getting sick the way his late wife had gotten sick. I'm not sure I understand this. I'm sorry. According to Sonny, she said, Tom came down Lake Drive in his Scout and saw Mort standing by himself where the lakeside path comes out. Near where the bodies were found. Yes, very near. Mort waved. Tom waved back. He drove by. Then, according to what Sonny says, Tom looked in his rearview mirror and saw another man with Mort and an old station wagon. Although neither the man nor the car had been there 10 seconds before. The man was wearing a black hat, he said. But you could see right through him. And the car, too. Oh, Amy, Ted said softly. The man was bullshitting you. Big time. She shook her head. I don't think Sonny is smart enough to make up such a story. He told me Tom thought he ought to get in touch with Greg and tell him he might have seen such a man after all, that it would be all right if he left out the see-through part. But Sonny said the old man was terrified. He was convinced that it was one of two things. Either he was coming down with Alzheimer's disease, or he'd seen a ghost. Well, it's certainly creepy, Evans said, and it was. The skin on his arms and back had crinkled into goose flesh for a moment or two. But it's hearsay. Hearsay from a dead man, in fact. Yes, but there's the other thing. She set her teacup on the desk, picked up her purse, and began to rummage in it. When I was cleaning out Mort's office, I found that hat, that awful black hat behind his desk. It gave me a shock because I wasn't expecting it. I thought the police must have taken it away as evidence or something. I hooked it out from behind there with a stick. It came out upside down, with the stick inside it. I used the stick to carry it outside and dump it in the trash cabinet. Do you understand? Ted clearly didn't. Evans clearly did. You didn't want to touch it. That's right. I didn't want to touch it. It landed right side up on one of the green trash bags. I'd swear to that. Then, about an hour later, I went out with a bag of old medicines and shampoos and things from the bathroom. When I opened the lid of the garbage cabinet to put it in, the hat was turned over again, and this was tucked into the sweatband. She pulled a folded sheet of paper from her purse and offered it to Evans with a hand that still trembled minutely. It wasn't there when the hat came out from behind the desk. I know that. Evans took the folded sheet and just held it for a moment. He didn't like it. It felt too heavy, and the texture was somehow wrong. I think there was a John Shooter, she said. I think he was Mort's greatest creation, a character so vivid that he actually did become real. And I think that this is a message from a ghost. He took the slip of paper and opened it. Written halfway down was the message. Mrs., I'm sorry for all the trouble. Things got out of hand. I'm going back to my home now. I got my story, which is all I came for in the first place. It is called Crowfoot Mile, and it's a crackerjack. Yours truly, John Shooter. The signature was a bald scrawl below the neat lines of script. Is this your late husband's signature, Amy? Evans asked. No, she said. Nothing like it. The three of them sat in the office, looking at one another. Fred Evans tried to think of something to say and could not. After a while, the silence and the smell of Ted Milner's pipe became more than any of them could stand. So Mr. and Mrs. Milner offered their thanks, said their goodbyes, and left his office to get on with their lives as best they could. And Fred Evans got on with his own as best he could. And sometimes, late at night, both he and the woman who had been married to Morton Rainey woke from dreams in which a man in a round-crowned black hat looked at them from sun-faded eyes, caught in nets of wrinkles. He looked at them with no love, but they both felt with an odd kind of stern pity. It was not a kind expression, and it left no feeling of comfort, but they also both felt, in their different places, that they could find room to live with that look and to tend their gardens. That's it. We are done with Secret Window, Secret Garden. And next week, we're going back to Xanth. We're going to be reading The Source of Magic by Piers Anthony, which is the second book starring Bink, and I believe that's his last book. So we're going to close Bink's story with Source of Magic. If you guys like the Xanth series after that book, then maybe we'll do some more. I do own some more of the stories, but as for Bink, he's done. So we'll see you guys next week with The Source of Magic.